Well, hello again from Eddie's hot seat here at the Newcastle's training ground. Now, before I tell you what the manager has said this morning to us press guys, looking ahead to Sunday's game down at West Ham and, of course, reflecting on the midweek win over Paris Saint-Germain. Yet there's still a lot of questions on that subject, and understandably so. Before we do that, injury news to come as well, and also I'll reveal which of the scorers from Wednesday night stroked my dog this week. That isn't a euphemism, he just genuinely did stroke little buddy. So I'll let you in on that when we return in Gosforth in a few minutes' time. But yeah, first of all, I want to point you to a piece I wrote in this morning's Daily Mail about Eddie Howe, and it feels timely. And I wasn't writing this in response to what was said on radio yesterday, but I've been sent the clip of Simon Jordan on TalkSport talking about how Eddie Howe might not be the manager to take Newcastle to where they need to be in terms of trophies. Now, I have to say, when I was sent the clip, I thought it was 2 years old, because that was an opinion. Eddie Howe being Newcastle's Mark Hughes, what Mark Hughes was to Manchester City. Yes, that opinion did exist once, but Eddie's body of work during the last 2 years has rendered that archaic, really redundant. It's an opinion which belongs in a museum for me. And you know, the caveat to all of this, I'm having a go at Simon. He's entitled to that opinion. Mail sport columnist, brilliant columnist for us, wonderful broadcaster. But the debate it's caused among Newcastle supporters, I thought it was only right to mention it. Now, like I say, the bit I did in the Mail this morning wasn't a response to that, but in actual fact it is very handy talking to it. And the point I make is that Eddie Howe is now, not now, he always has been for me, but he is. When you beat a team like PSG 4-1 in the Champions League, you start to get recognition, and the conversation turns to, is this one of Europe's elite level managers? Well, read the bit I've done in the Mail. I'll put the link in the description below. Yes, he is for me. And if Eddie had done this, under the name of Edward Howitzer in the Bundesliga with some fashionable, fashionista, hipster club, he would have had one of the top jobs in Europe by now. Newcastle is one of the top jobs in Europe, of course, but you know the point I'm making. But because it's almost like Eddie has been here forever now, he's been a manager for 14, 15 years, part of that mystique has worn off just because of his longevity. He shouldn't be penalised for that, of course, but in terms of perception, that is a byproduct of it, and it's wrong really, because this man is, and the piece I've written today, like I say, details all of the reason why Newcastle are so lucky to have him, and he really is up there with the best of the best. And one little anecdote I lead the piece on, I didn't realise that until this week. 2 years ago, Eddie, of course, we all know, missed his first Newcastle game because of COVID, home match against Brentford. I didn't know until now that rather than, and he was really floored by the virus, he spent a lot of time in bed that week, rather than sit in his comfortable slacks, his pyjamas, whatever, he got changed into his full match day tracksuit to watch the game from his hotel room. And I just think captures the absolute obsession and dedication and that almost nerdy-like obsession that he has to his craft and to his trade, and that responsibility he feels to making the best of himself, his players, and the football club. And it felt like this week, PSG 4-1 was almost a culmination of those 2 years worth of work. And like I say, I enjoyed writing that piece, and I thought it was a timely piece to write, really, on the back of such a statement, a landmark victory. And I'll be back in a few minutes with a little bit more in terms of what Eddie had said, sat here in this seat this morning. So yeah, I'll see you guys soon. Right, so we're back here on Linden Road in Gosforth, a very nice part of town, and increasingly becoming home to a large number of Newcastle players. But first of all, we've got to start with the news. It's the big news, really, the reason you guys have stayed watching the video through the first few minutes. Not injury news. Who stroked my dog? And the answer is none other than Fabian Schär. Yeah, Fabian Schär stroked my dog could one day be the title. If ever I do write my life story, I think that would be a good place to start. Yeah, I bumped into to Fabian around here. Had a very quick chat with him. He's in a good mood, as you would expect, on Thursday morning, having done what he did the night before, and he was very happy to oblige with a little tickle of Buddy's neck. So there you go, lucky Buddy. Now, other news, probably the real reason why you've stayed on, is fitness. And yet, we've just spoken to Eddie there this morning. Not a great deal has changed. Joe Linton and Callum Wilson remain doubts for the game down at West Ham. They're struggling with hamstring injuries. Neither were on the bench on Wednesday. What I will say is my information is neither player is what you would call injured. You know, they're not there in the treatment room having you know, work being done to the hamstring. They're out there on the grass. They are able to run, they're able to kick a ball, they're able to take part, but just with hamstrings there is caution, especially when it comes to Wilson, for all the reasons we know, but arguably more so with Joe Linton, given he had just come back from the injury when Newcastle put him on. Afternoon. There we go. Safe round here. Now, he came on, of course, at the weekend when you can have the discussion, should he have come on? Bear in mind, he just played 90 minutes versus Manchester City in the first game back. He went down with a hamstring problem within 3 minutes. I think that's probably the reason there is that degree of caution there too. I wouldn't expect to say either start on Sunday, but I certainly think there's a chance of one, if not both, perhaps being on the bench. In terms of the starting 11 down there, well, Anthony Gordon's out. That's big for Newcastle. That really is big. I do think that, if you're talking about chances and odds, I do think that diminishes the chances just because of what he brings to the team at the moment. We've spoken about that a lot, and he was a player who slipped under the radar really on Wednesday night in terms of my post-match reflections, and when I've done the community tab with regards to man the match, all of the talk is for Buddy's friend Fabian Schär, Jamal Lascelles, Sean Longstaff and Bruno Guimaraes, and I think they were the top 4 performers, but Gordon really set the tone. And when I did the video the other night, I couldn't remember whose challenge it was early on that sort of ignited the fire inside the stadium. It was Anthony Gordon. No surprises there. I should have just hazarded a guess really, but yeah, I watched it back and it was him, and it was bizarre during those early exchanges, wasn't it? It was like Newcastle had more completed celebrations than they actually had completed passes. It was quite something to see players thunder through those challenges and celebrate as if scoring really. Bruno did it twice, Gordon did it, Dan Burn as well, Anthony Gordon, and you know, what point was I making? I was making a point about the starting 11 on Sunday. I'll wrap that up just quickly. I think because without Gordon, we'll probably see Elliot Anderson move up to the left. Other than that, I think Newcastle will be largely unchanged. Go back to Wednesday's game, and I watched my video back, and it's hard. I've had so many questions from people who weren't there, and you know, one former Premier League man just sent me a message, what was it like, a former Newcastle player who lives abroad now, what was it like? And honestly, you know, when you sat there, you're in your little bubble and you're writing your report, and because it's the deadline, you almost shut the outside world off in many ways, because you're there to do a job ultimately. And when I watched my video back from the other night, you know, I looked at it and I thought, have I really captured the energy and everything? Because it's only when you sort of go away and you sit and you have a beer and you talk to others and you watch back the highlights and you remember and you think back that you actually then really appreciate just quite how incredible it was inside the stadium. And it was the ultimate example of a 12th man. PSG really were beaten before a ball had been kicked. Now, I got that feeling before kick-off. I recorded that here the other night, didn't I? I thought when you had the whole stadium singing in unison 10 minutes before kick-off, it just told you this was going to be something special, and so it proved really. And while there is, you know, this talk of it being the first Champions League night in 21 years and the best night in 26 years since Barcelona, you know, all of that is true, but what I will say is you're not going to have to wait another 21 or 26 years for that again. 21 days really until Dortmund come here, and we're going to probably see and experience all that again. And it really was quite something. And you know, I put it back to people who were asking these questions of me. I said, well, what did it sound like on the telly? I'm intrigued to know. And they just said it sounded wonderful, it sounded noisy. And you know, when Newcastle scored the goals, I hate that phrase limbs, I really do. I think it's such a soccer AM phrase, but you know, when you looked at the stands when Newcastle scored, and just that mass movement of bodies and unbridled joy, it really was just something quite sensational. And as I said, the lucky thing is we've got this all to come again. Now, one of the scorers this week, of course, was Dan Burn, and I just want to point you to our Daily Mail podcast with my colleague Ian Ladyman and Chris Sutton as well. It's the All Coming Up podcast. I'll put the link below, and I've just listened to it there, and Chris has made a pretty compelling argument for Dan Burn being part of the England squad. And you know, the reason they put was, well, there isn't a better left back in England at the moment, and Ian Ladyman made this point, and I would come back and make it myself. I think the only better left back in the country at the minute who is fit and playing and in form is Kieran Trippier. And of course he plays right back for Newcastle, but I was up at the Scotland game last month for England. Trippier was left back and he was fantastic that night. He's such a good player. We know you can put him anywhere. He's just a good footballer. You know what Chris says is right. If Ben Chilwell and Luke Shaw, the two guys ahead of Dan Burn, and they're not fit, then why shouldn't Dan Burn be in the England squad? Now, do I think he's the answer for England going forward? Is he what you would call an international class left back? Well, in terms of the way they want to play, well, no, probably not. But you know, that shouldn't take away that he perhaps is deserving of being in the conversation at least. But if I can rewind, I honestly think maybe that moment has passed now for Dan. But I honestly thought going into the World Cup, in terms of a situation for a World Cup, you pick the best players for now. I thought Dan Burn should have been on the plane to Qatar before Christmas there. Another Newcastle player. Now, Eddie was asked about this morning. Of course, Wilson missed out because he's struggling with a hamstring problem. Sean Longstaff, another, Dan Burn, Anthony Gordon didn't make the England squad this week. Eddie seemed a little relieved about that this morning for obvious reasons. But brings us on to Sean Longstaff as well. And is there a better facilitator of colleagues in the country right now? I mean, listen, Sean on Wednesday actually popped up with his own goal and brilliant individual performance, but there's no coincidence that since he came back into the team, Bruno all of a sudden looks better. And Joe Willock, of course, during Newcastle's bad run, he grew in reputation and importance and appreciation because he was out of the side. I honestly think Newcastle always need one of Longstaff or Willock in there. That then brings out more and allows others to concentrate on what they need to do. No coincidence as well, Sandro Tonali had his best game on Wednesday night since the opening weekend of the season, with Longstaff in there doing what we call the running and the dirty work around him. Well, he did the dirty work and come up with something beautiful at the end of it as well. And Sean's form right now, he's only 25 years old, and while you might look at the profile in terms of where he'd been previously, 2 years ago on the verge of leaving the club, not really in the side, that doesn't mean you can't be transformed as a player. I think there's almost a thing with Sean where he burst onto the scene, he was being talked about Manchester United, England, and then fell away. That the opinion and the wider perception people have is of that middle version of himself. Well, I'm sorry, there's a new version now. You've got Sean Longstaff Mark III almost, and it's the Sean Longstaff Mark III for the influence of Eddie Howe. And for me, if he continues the way he's going, I think he should be in the reckoning for England. Purely because, goes back to the point I made at the start of this little segment, what he can do to others. If Sean Longstaff is in there doing the job, Jordan Henderson's still in the England squad. Come on, Sean Longstaff can do that job, enabling the likes of a Jude Bellingham to go and then do their stuff, what they do so brilliantly, like Bruno Guimaraes does. So there you go. I just had a conversation there with a supporter in the coffee shop, and I think if Newcastle can come out of that having protected the unbeaten run that they're on, going into a 2-week break, I think Eddie Howe would settle for that, because West Ham are good. They've sold Declan Rice, and I like the players they've brought in. Edson Alvarez from Ajax, I'm not going to profess to know a great deal about him. From what I've seen so far, certainly when we looked at Newcastle during the early weeks of the season, you thought actually he's someone who could have done a job plugging that number 6 position. They've got Sean Longstaff back now. He doesn't play 6, of course, but you get the point in terms of that steel and that aggression and that energy in midfield. Alvarez, I think, is a good buy. James Ward-Prowse has been sensational since he's gone there. Jared Bowen, the form he is in. Yeah, I remember. Yeah, Steve Bruce telling us once that all Jared Bowen did was score goals. He wasn't convinced about his all-round game, but there you go. That's England's Jared Bowen as well, by the way. Now, this weekend, of course, also marks 2 years since the Saudi-led takeover of the club, and yet to think that it was 2 years ago I was sat down with Amanda Savely in her Jesmond Dean hotel room getting the first interview with her as Newcastle owner. It's quite remarkable what has happened in that time, and they've got no right really to have gone from where they were 19th in the Premier League to beating Paris Saint-Germain and dismantling one of Europe's top sides 4-1, and for the reasons as to why they've done that, well, I've said before, the overriding reason is they got the manager right. But don't underestimate, yes, they've spent money, but so have a lot of clubs in that time. A lot of clubs have spent the same and got worse. A lot of clubs have spent more and stayed the same. Newcastle have spent it well, and the players they've brought in, they've improved. They've improved those they inherited. And yes, for me, the overriding reason is Eddie But you know, don't underestimate either. You know, the energy and the drive and the ambition of those owners, especially the UK-based owners. I think they have done a fantastic job in reuniting a broken football club in that time. So they are, and it's what we asked Eddie this morning. You know, Yasser Al-Rumayyan's declared his ambition for the club to be #1 in the world, and while nights like Wednesday may give the impression that Newcastle are already there, they're not. They're not there off the pitch, and they're not quite yet there on it either. But certainly everything is heading in that direction. And as I go back to what I said at the top of the video, they've got the right man to do it. You know, this isn't phase 1 in terms of Eddie Howe taking them so far and then someone taking over the baton. Eddie Howe is the man who can take them all the way for me. So yeah, the postman, he always delivers. Eddie has done so far. Was that clumsy? No, we'll leave it in. We'll leave it in. But yeah, guys. So I'll be down at West Ham on Sunday. Again, I think it'll be a good marker of where they're at domestically, because I do see West Ham as not at Newcastle's level, but I think they're a really good sort of mid to upper table barometer of how Newcastle have emerged from this period, when undoubtedly they've been brilliant, they've been fantastic. You know, Wednesday was them back to their very best and more. Now they've got to pick themselves up physically, mentally, and go again. Going to be another intriguing one, guys. They all are. This has been brilliant. It's fascinating. I'll see you again post-match on Sunday. Click on the links below, which take you through to the Daily Mail's podcasts, the links to my stories from today and this week, and we'll do it all again on Sunday across all Mail platforms. Okay, hit like and subscribe as well. Always important. Take care, guys. See you soon.